The air beneath the covered walkway stagnated, heavy and motionless, filled with the burning smell of sun-baked asphalt and a hint of diesel drifting from the support yard vehicle. It was that dead hour of the afternoon when the lazy but relentless sun pressed down a layer of heat that glued uniforms to skin and frayed nerves. Commander Eva Russell advanced with a steady, measured step, never rushing. Her gaze stayed fixed on the entrance of the Liberty Dining Hall, about 50 meters ahead. Her boots slid over the concrete without making the slightest sound, a habit born from years of controlled movement. In her left hand rested a tablet, screen off. She moved through the slow, disordered flow of personnel coming off training like an island of deliberate calm. Leaning against a concrete pillar, 3 soldiers sprawled in a pose of fake relaxation. Sergeant Lon, massive enough to look as though he had sacrificed his neck to his bulk, dominated the trio. Beside him, Specialist Harper, lanky and jittery, wore the perpetual half-smile of a man always looking for an audience. The third, Corporal Kitton, younger and still learning the craft of military insolence, mimicked their attitudes with zeal. He had just come from a firing exercise, still wrapped in the smell of burnt powder and sweat. Their explosive laughter echoed under the metal structure, laughter meant to fill the space, to mark territory. When Russell approached, Harper spotted her immediately. He nudged Lon. "Look at that, Sarge. Another officer who thinks she's a regular grunt at chow time." The sergeant's eyes swept over her silhouette. He noticed the silver oak leaf of a commander but no battalion insignia, no company patch, nothing he recognized. She came from the 327th Signals Intelligence Wing, which most infantrymen like him considered a black box of geeks and radio waves. She was neither tall nor imposing, athletic without showing off, enough for his trained eye to size her up instantly as non-threatening. Her silence, that total lack of reaction to them, was immediately interpreted as timidity. "Looks like one of those little intel shadows," Lon called out loud enough for half the passageway to hear. "Probably panics every time her GPS glitches." Kitton snickered, eager to join in. "The commander need an escort?" The path to the salad bar can be dangerous. Eva Russell did not slow down, did not look aside. To them, it was an invitation. Her indifference wasn't read as professionalism but as weakness. They didn't see an officer, they saw prey. When she reached them, Sergeant Lon took a calculated step and planted himself directly in front of her. A schoolyard reflex, a primitive dominance move. He crossed his massive arms, forcing her to stop. She halted calmly, body relaxed. Her gaze slid to the space to the left of the sergeant, assessing the most efficient route to continue. "Can we help you, Commander?" Lon drawled, dragging out the rank like a word too heavy. Passers-by looked away, quickening their pace. "I need to get through," Russell replied. Her voice was steady, without tension, a smooth stone dropped into the murky water of the sergeant's ego. He didn't know how to interpret it. Harper stepped forward at once, shrinking the distance even more. "You see," he explained with a wide, false smile. "We're conducting a very serious inspection of the structural integrity of this passage. Safety issue. Wouldn't want officers tripping and spilling their swamp juice." Kitton completed the trap by positioning himself on her right. She was boxed in. The air seemed to thicken. Russell's gaze lifted from the ground and rose slowly. It passed over the 2 subordinates' faces before settling on Lon. Her expression was almost clinically neutral. She wasn't looking at 3 soldiers, she was assessing a tactical situation. Her eyes drifted above their heads to the 2 black cameras fixed under the overhang of the neighboring buildings C-12 and C-13, noting their angles and fields of view. Then she looked back at the sergeant. "The inspection is over," she said simply. "Move." The quiet authority compressed into that single word surprised them for a moment. It wasn't a shouted order or a plea. It was a procedure stated as an obvious fact. Lon's face flushed red. He was a sergeant, the chief in his small kingdom. And this discreet officer had just treated him like faulty equipment. "You've got one hell of an attitude problem, you know that?" he growled, stepping closer, violating her personal space. You should learn to show respect to the people who do the real work around here. Eva Russell didn't flinch. No tension, no preparation for a fight, just a deep, almost unsettling calm. She had absorbed their jab, their aggressive posture, their public humiliation, and all of it was for her nothing more than a set of parameters to record, one data point among many. The incident was now logged by several sensors. She had everything she needed. Without a word, Eva Russell took a precise step to the left, slipping around Sergeant Lawn's bulk with an almost fluid ease. She didn't even brush against him. She didn't hurry, didn't give them any grip to react to. In a breath, she had passed them and was calmly continuing her walk toward the Liberty Dining Hall. Her pace was the same as before, steady and composed. Harper already had his mouth open, ready to fire off another remark, but Lawn stopped him with a sharp gesture. The sergeant stared at her retreating back, a knot of irritation and incomprehension forming in his gut. Her indifference to their provocation drove him mad. It was worse than an insult. "Let her go," he muttered, more to himself than to his men. "The little shadow just signed a check her body won't be able to cash." He spat on the concrete, a final, pointless gesture. They watched her until she disappeared into the building, swallowed by the banality of military architecture. They thought they had won something. They mistook her silence for surrender. Eva Russell's quarters were the embodiment of a mind that valued function over comfort. An austere room furnished with the strict military standard. Pale gray walls without a single photo or trinket. No sign of attachment, no memory. On a sturdy workbench near the wall, an A5 Trident rebreather lay fully disassembled. Each piece was placed on a black anti-static mat, aligned with clinical precision. For her, dismantling this vital equipment bordered on ritual, a way of bringing order to her own mind. On the adjacent desk, a single personal item sat in a simple black frame. Not a picture, but an embroidered patch, a stylized phoenix. Its wings, made of patterns resembling golden circuits, rose from a nest of dark radio waves. Under the emblem shone a Latin motto stitched in silver thread, Antennas Fide, faith in the antenna. It was the insignia of a former secret unit of electromagnetic intelligence, specialized in the art of finding a signal in the chaos. She set her tablet on the desk but didn't sit immediately. She walked to the small window and looked out at the meticulously trimmed base lawn, her gaze unfocused. She replayed the scene in the covered walkway, not the insults or the sensation of being boxed in, but the measurable elements. 1642, Bravo walkway sector between Training Complex 12 and the dining facilities. Involved personnel, Sergeant Lawn, Specialist Harper, Corporal Kitton. Witnesses, 6 to 8 people, identity determinable. Surveillance, cameras C12 and C13, west-facing, unobstructed. She felt no anger. Anger was just a corrosive variable harmful to efficiency. What she felt resembled more a quiet disappointment. A system, whether a communication network or a chain of command, relies on its protocols. These 3 soldiers had just violated the most basic ones. A flaw in the system, a bug to fix, not to punish, to correct. She left the window and finally sat at the desk. On her tablet screen she ignored the complex graphs of an ongoing analysis, a polymorphic frequency hopping signal, and opened a blank incident report form. Her fingers ran across the virtual keyboard with practiced ease. Incident report. Time, 1642Z, August 24th. Location, Bravo Sector walkway between Training Complex 12 and Dining Facility 07. Reporting Officer, Commander Eva Russell. Involved personnel. A. Sergeant Lawn. B. Specialist Harper. C. Corporal Kitton. Summary: the 3 soldiers verbally and physically impeded the officer's movement. Unprofessional remarks, physical obstruction by Sergeant Lawn. After nonverbal refusal to engage, the officer was allowed to proceed. Witnesses, unidentified personnel, approximately 6 to 8 individuals. Evidence, event recorded by exterior cameras C12 and C13. Requested action, entry into file. No disciplinary measure required at this stage. She reread the whole thing, checking for the total absence of emotion or subjective interpretation. Satisfied, she signed it digitally and sent the report to the battalion's administrative server. She knew the mechanics. A report filed for record only would sleep in the archives until someone needed to exhume it. One more data point. The first move in a logical sequence. Documentation always precedes action. File closed. She returned to her rebreather. She picked up the main oxygen sensor and turned it gently between her fingers, examining each seal, each gold contact. The outside world was already fading. Machines, they always obeyed the rules. She checked the seals, examined the gold contacts, then felt the clean, satisfying click as the piece slid back into place. The outside world, with its messy emotions and unpredictable behavior, dissipated. Here, in the clean and reassuring rigor of engineering, everything followed a logic. Every component had its function. Every action triggered a measurable reaction. It was a reliable universe. She continued her work with a steady hand, her mind calm, recalibrating herself as she recalibrated her gear. The first move had been made. All that remained was to observe the system's reaction. It came 26 hours later. Sergeant Lon stumbled across the report while checking his unit's administrative records. He didn't see a simple factual statement but an attack. In his mind, written reports were weapons, and that silent officer had just fired the first shot. Her request for record only, far from seeming measured, looked to him like a cowardly ploy to build a case without facing them directly. His anger exploded. He called in Harper and Kitton. Their collective resentment fed itself like a stoked fire. Very quickly, they convinced themselves she needed to be taught a lesson, to be reminded of the physical reality that existed beyond tablets and forms. Eva Russell was in Hangar 12. A vast structure smelling of ozone and cold steel. Most of the hangar lay in darkness, reserved for low-light drills. She, however, worked in a lit alcove, adjusting a new radio triangulation module, a matte black box dotted with dials and connectors. She compared her readings to a reference transmitter placed on the far end of the hangar. A task requiring total concentration. Only the faint hum of the device and, occasionally, the clap of a loose panel outside shaken by the wind broke the silence. The heavy hangar door opened just enough to let 3 silhouettes slip inside. The contrast with the exterior light cut them into stark shadows for an instant before the door closed, plunging the place back into thick dimness. Russell didn't look up, but she registered their arrival. Her body stayed still, but her attention mapped the vast space instinctively, stacked training mats, metal racks, and, most important, the small blinking red LED of the tactical camera mounted on a beam. T-12, it was operational. Well, what do we have here? Lon's voice boomed too loudly in the empty space. The ghost from command center playing with her toys. Eva straightened slowly, placed a protective cap over a sensitive sensor, then turned to them calmly. The 3 men had spread out to encircle her, clumsily imitating a tactical maneuver. So, writing reports now, Commander? Harper sneered, hands shoved deep in his pockets. You think a piece of paper's gonna protect you? Around here, we settle things face to face. Your complaint is incomplete, Russell replied simply. You're missing a formal submission. I recommend filing one if you believe you were wronged. That procedural answer fell like a spark into gasoline. Her detachment, so alien to the brute emotion they were trying to impose, only infuriated them further. Oh, don't worry, we'll file one, Lon growled, stepping forward heavily. After giving you something concrete to put in it. He cracked his knuckles dramatically. You think you're better than us? Hiding behind your rank, your gadgets. Let's see how you manage without all that. Specialist Harper, tense and too impulsive, struck first. He lunged, throwing a wide, predictable right hook aimed at her head. A crude blow meant more to intimidate than to land cleanly. For Eva Russell, time seemed to stretch. The punch wasn't a threat, it was a physical equation to solve. As his arm swept toward her, she pivoted on her lead foot, turning her body inward and out of the strike's path. Her left hand rose, not to block, but to redirect. Her palm caught his wrist, absorbed it, and guided the movement instead of stopping it. In the same motion, her right hand caught his elbow. Harper's body, already committed, was carried forward by his own inertia. She simply accompanied the flow, and he pitched forward, losing all balance before crashing full force into Lon, who had been closing in behind him. The whole exchange had lasted only 2 seconds. Kit Tun, seeing the specialist collapse, let out a shout and charged, brutal and untrained. Russell lowered her center of gravity, anchoring herself to the ground. When he entered her range, she swept her right leg in a low, precise arc, hooking his ankle. It wasn't a strike, just the removal of a point of support. The rest was handled by his own momentum. He crashed down heavily, the air driven out of him in a painful gasp. 2. Neutralized. Lon, shoving Harper out of his way, roared and tried to crush her in a bear hug, hoping to overpower her with brute force. It was the most dangerous attack, a surge of mass and strength meant to engulf her. And Eva Russell was no longer where he thought she was. She had slipped inside his grab, too close for him to generate any force. Her left hand pressed firmly against his chest to control the distance while her right hand slid under his arm, gripping his shoulder with precision. With a pivot of her hips, she turned the sergeant's momentum into a fulcrum and executed a flawless throw. Lon, despite his bulk, felt his body lift, suspended in a weightless instant before slamming brutally onto his back. The impact knocked the breath, and any will to continue, out of him. Harper, regaining his footing, lunged at her one last time. His face was a mix of shock and rage, and he shouted incoherent words. Eva met his charge with a single clean movement, a half-step forward, and as he extended his hand to grab her, she drove a precise palm heel strike just below the clavicle, where a major nerve plexus lies. A dull thump. Harper's right arm went limp, dead weight. A wave of electric pain shot up to his fingers. Certainty drained from his expression. He staggered back before collapsing to his knees, clutching his paralyzed limb. The hangar plunged into a thick silence, broken only by Kitten's groans and Lon's muffled wheezing. 3 men on the ground, neutralized. Eva Russell stood in the center, perfectly upright. Her breathing steady, her uniform almost untouched. She hadn't thrown a single punch, not a single kick. Nothing meant to injure, only mechanical control, applied anatomy. From Harper's first swing to his final collapse, barely 8 seconds had passed. Above, the small red LED of tactical camera T12CT01 blinked calmly, recording every fraction of a second. At the edge of the lit alcove, a silhouette emerged from the shadows, Captain Elias Carter, tablet in hand, his face marked by shock. He had come to check on the calibration and had witnessed the end of the confrontation. He saw the 3 soldiers on the floor, the commander utterly composed, and the camera's glowing red eye. Implacably, the hangar door opened again, this time with a deeper rumble. 2 military police officers rushed in, alerted by the motion detection system, weapons up, beams of light cutting through the dark. Everyone on the ground, hands visible, one of them barked. Eva Russell raised her hands slowly to shoulder height, a gesture of cooperation. Lon, propping himself up on a trembling elbow, pointed an accusing finger at her. She attacked us. She's crazy, attacked for no reason. The MPs approached cautiously, 3 soldiers on the ground, 1 officer standing. At first glance, it looked bad for her. "Commander, I need you to explain what happened," said the senior MP, his voice heavy with suspicion. Eva simply looked at him. "Captain Carter is a witness," she stated evenly. "The entire event is recorded by the hangar's tactical camera. Designation T12CT01. I'll submit a supplemental report within the hour. No justification, no defense, just facts and evidence." Captain Carter stepped forward. "I confirm, Sergeant," he said to the MP. "I saw everything." The commander defended herself. The MP's eyes moved from Carter to Russell, then to the men still on the floor. The simplistic story of an officer attacking her subordinates began to crumble. Confusion gave way to the realization of a much more complex case. He pressed his mic center. "This is MP2 unit. Situation at Hangar 12. One officer involved with 3 enlisted personnel. Conflicting statements. We are securing the area." News spread across the base like a wildfire through dry grass. The first tales, fueled by Lawson's and Harper's friends, painted Eva Russell as an unstable, violent officer who had assaulted 3 of her own. The intel spook who had finally snapped. Then a second rumor took shape, quieter, but more persistent, fed by the military police on site and by Captain Carter's murmured remarks. People spoke of an impossible fight, of 3 men thrown down in a flash without her inflicting the slightest serious injury, of a commander strangely calm. The 2 versions clashed, wrapping the base in a haze of doubt and whispering. The casual attitudes, the cocky glances in the mess line began to fade. Something had changed. Captain Carter did not let the rumors ferment. He secured the video, downloaded it onto a hardened tablet, and went straight to the office of the base commander, Colonel Marcus Hale. Hale was a man forged by 30 years of command, pragmatic, wary of turmoil, respectful of competence and discipline. He listened to Carter's concise report without interrupting once. Then Colonel Hale launched the video. The large screen in his office projected the footage in high definition, silent but merciless. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowed, expression hardened. He saw the 3 soldiers cornering her, closing in, their body language aggressive, encroaching on her space. He saw Harper throw the first strike, and above all, he saw the response. This wasn't a brawl. It was the methodical dissection of an assault, a choreography of pivots, levers, and absolute control. He watched the scene a second time, then a third. With each viewing, he noticed more, the precision of her movements, the complete lack of hesitation, the extreme economy of motion, and above all the total absence of anger. She didn't touch a single vulnerable zone, Hale murmured to himself. No strikes to the head, throat, or pelvis, only motor points, joint manipulation. She wasn't trying to hurt them, only to neutralize them. He finally leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Pull up the report she filed yesterday, the one about the covered walkway incident," he ordered. The captain complied. The text appeared, brief, cold, clinical. Next, Hale requested the service records of the 4 individuals involved. Lawson's, Harper's, and Kitten's were ordinary, marked with a few reprimands softened by leniency. Nothing serious. Eva's, on the other hand, looked like a classified document. Long sections were redacted, but what remained visible was enough. Several commendations for bravery outside combat, glowing evaluations from Joint Special Operations commanders, and a list of qualifications incomprehensible for a simple intelligence officer. Advanced Defensive Control Instructor, Master Diver, Parachutist. Hale studied the screen for a long moment. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, the silent professional, the provocation escalated by the 3 soldiers, her measured response, her minimalist report. "They woke the bear," Carter murmured. "No, Captain," Hale corrected darkly. "They poked a perfectly calibrated EOD robot, and they're lucky it was set to non-lethal." He straightened. "Sergeant Lawson and his men have filed a formal complaint against Commander Russell, alleging unprovoked assault. From this moment, we leave the realm of rumor and enter official procedure." He stood and walked to the window overlooking the base. "I want a hearing. Article 15. Tomorrow, 0900, main conference room. I will preside, you will present the evidence." He paused. "Lawson, Harper, and Kitton will be present with their company commander and their first sergeant. And I want Commander Russell." He turned toward Carter, gaze hard. "This will not be handled behind closed doors. This is a cultural problem. The correction must be public." The conference room was arranged like an improvised tribunal. Colonel Marcus Hale sat at the head of the long polished table, impassive. At his right, Captain Carter, his tablet linked to the wall display. On one side of the table, Sergeant Lawson, Specialist Harper, and Corporal Kitton, flanked by their uneasy company commander. On the other, Commander Eva Russell, alone, motionless, her hands folded on the table, her gaze fixed somewhere behind the colonel, utterly detached. Hale opened the session, his voice clear and cold. This is a non-judicial Article 15 hearing under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The purpose of this hearing is the formal complaint submitted by Sergeant Lawson against Commander Russell for assault. Sergeant, you have the floor. Present your version of events. He stood, cleared his throat, then launched into a carefully polished story. He spoke of a simple equipment check in the hangar, described a strangely agitated Russell, claimed he had asked her a procedural question before she suddenly snapped and attacked them without the slightest provocation. Harper and Kitton, questioned in turn, confirmed his account in the same monotone voice, their lie too smooth, too rehearsed. They painted a portrait of a dangerously unstable officer, an unleashed assault, a surge of unjustified force. We're trained soldiers, Lawson concluded, swollen with indignation. But we weren't prepared to be ambushed by our own officer. Colonel Hale asked no questions. He listened until the silence stretched, long seconds, before turning his head toward Carter. Captain Carter, your evidence. Yes, Colonel. He tapped a key. The large screen lit up. The silent footage from Hangar 12 filled the room. They watched the three soldiers enter and surround her. They saw the threatening posturing, the intrusive gestures. They saw Harper's fist come crashing toward her. And then the 8 seconds that followed. The lie they had so patiently constructed evaporated instantly under the brutal clarity of the video. The recording did not show a savage assault. It revealed a controlled defense, astonishingly elegant, almost choreographic. The video showed Eva Russell moving with an economy of motion so extreme it seemed every millimeter had been pre-calculated. She deflected, never struck. She controlled, never harmed. On the screen, 3 armed soldiers initiated an attack that she neutralized methodically without throwing a single offensive blow. When the footage ended on her calm silhouette standing among the 3 downed assailants, the entire room fell into absolute silence. Lawson's face had gone pale. Harper and Kitton stared at the table, all their swagger stripped away, replaced by the icy dread of men who know they've been exposed. Colonel Hale did not look at them. His eyes remained fixed on the frozen image on the screen. Before I render my judgment, he said, his voice dangerously calm, I would like to consult someone else. Bring him in. The door opened. Master Chief David Tanaka entered the room. A living legend on the base, the highest-ranking special operations trainer. A figure spoken of with respect in every hallway. He walked with the silent authority of a man with nothing left to prove. He inclined his head to Hale. Master Chief, thank you for coming, said the colonel. You are recognized as this installation's undisputed expert in close-quarters combat and control techniques. I'd like your professional evaluation of this footage. Captain Carter replayed the 8-second clip. Tanaka watched with an almost clinical intensity, eyes unblinking. When it ended, he turned to Hale. Sir, he began in a deep voice, what you're seeing here is not an assault. It is a flawless application of Tier 1 Defensive Control Program, Module 7, the one on de-escalation against multiple unarmed assailants. These techniques have a single purpose, establish control with the minimum force necessary while limiting injury to the opponents. He gestured toward the screen with his chin. Note the absence of strikes, the exclusive use of joint lever pivots for off-balancing, and the precision targeting of motor points to induce temporary incapacity. No blows to the head or torso. Nothing aggressive. It's all control, strictly control. He paused. This, he said slowly, is not something you learn in basic training. It takes years. This isn't a fight, it's a demonstration by an expert. Then, for the first time, he looked directly at Eva Russell. His eyes narrowed with profound respect. Colonel, Commander Russell did more than study this program. For 2 years she was one of the lead instructors at the Joint Special Warfare Center. She helped write the manual used to train our elite operators. A ripple of astonishment passed through the room. Lawson, Harper, and Kitton almost jerked back as if struck. The low-ranking intelligence officer they had mocked was, in reality, one of the instructors who taught SEALs and Delta operators how to survive in a hand-to-hand fight. They hadn't provoked a nerd. They had assaulted their own instructor. Colonel Hale finally turned his gaze on them. "I see. Not only did you assault a superior," he declared, "but you conspired to lie in an official statement. You wasted the command's time. You dishonored your uniform and your unit. Your behavior reveals a serious failure of discipline and character." The verdict fell without hesitation. Demotion for all three of them, 60 days of pay withheld, restriction with additional duties, and a permanent letter of reprimand in their file, a career death sentence. Their company commander was ordered to supervise a full remedial program on respect and professionalism. Then Hale turned to Eva Russell. His expression softened slightly. "Commander," he said clearly, "your conduct, both during the initial harassment and the physical assault, was exemplary. Your composure and strict adherence to procedure honor your rank in this base. The complaint against you is dismissed as unfounded. This incident will be removed from your record. You are dismissed." Eva rose, saluted with flawless precision, and left the room without looking back. The correction had been delivered. In the days that followed, the atmosphere on the base shifted subtly but profoundly. The account of the hearing in Master Chief Tanaka's testimony became the dominant version, the one everyone eventually heard. The arrogant carelessness that had lingered in certain corners of the command evaporated. When Commander Russell now walked through the chow line, the mocking looks disappeared. People stepped aside. Eyes lowered. A silent recognition, all the stronger for never being spoken aloud. One afternoon, as Eva left the signals intelligence wing, she spotted Tanaka near the exit in civilian workout gear. As she approached, he inclined his head slowly. He tapped a finger against the small phoenix patch sewn discreetly on his gym bag, the special operations version of the symbol she kept in her quarters. A silent message, the sign of a shared code, of quiet mastery. She returned the gesture with a brief dip of her chin. Understanding passed between them. No words were needed. The conclusion came a week later. Eva Russell was where she belonged most, in the dim hush of the Mission Analysis Center, a sanctuary of silence where only the soft hum of servers and the concentrated murmurs of analysts reigned. At the center of the room, a large holographic display projected in relief a contested river valley somewhere in hostile territory. The terrain lines seemed to float in the air, phosphorescent and fragile like strands of light. Eva was analyzing enemy communication patterns, tracking the ghost of a signal through a chaos of electronic interference. Captain Carter approached, his steps swallowed by the raised technical flooring. "Commander," he said quietly. "The intelligence packet for Operation Iron Cascade is ready for validation. We isolated the polymorphic frequency hopping pattern you predicted. It's exactly where your model placed it." She slowly lifted her eyes from her console. The shift from the glowing screen to the three-dimensional map produced a brief transition in her gaze. Then the data aligned in her mind like gears already oiled. She could already see the interception points, the exploitable gaps, the windows for action. She simply nodded. Nothing more. The work was always what mattered. Carter hesitated, a rare flicker of uncertainty in him. "The files related to the Article 15 hearing have been officially closed and sealed," he said after a moment. "Lawson and his team were transferred this morning. It's over." Eva turned her gaze from the projected enemy valley for just a moment to rest it on the captain. Her face remained neutral, but her gaze was clear, focused, detached from the past. To her, all of it was nothing more than a closed loop, an identified system error, documented, corrected, permanently purged. "The correction is complete," she replied simply. Then she returned to her station, her fingers already gliding over the console with calm, methodical speed. Her mind sank back into the silent war of information. A conflict with no visible weapons, no noise, yet constant. Behind her, a base now slightly more just, slightly more disciplined, continued its life in the shadow of what she had set in motion. Before her, the next mission was already appearing in green on the interface, and Eva Russell, perfectly centered, resumed tracking the next trace of a lost signal in the digital turmoil.